because I honestly don't know what's going on with the car. So this is definitely a new issue. If it's anything internal to that engine, we're not going to spectator drags. And our Sebring track day on December 16th, also probably canceled. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. My name's Anthony, you're watching the Driver Mod, and we're just gonna get right to the chase. The GT350 is not happy. The GT350 is not healthy. It's having some sort of issue that has definitely got me worried about the internal workings of the engine. Recent video, we went out to Vegas, we went to SEMA 2022. We had a great time out there. Car was performing flawlessly while we were out there. The day before we loaded up to head home, the 350 had a bit of an odd issue, and one that I've never encountered with the car to this point in time. I just dropped off a couple friends at the airport to fly home and went to go fire up the car, and it wouldn't fire. It just cranked for about 8 seconds, 10 seconds, and then it shut off. It was shooting smoke out the back, and it smelled like raw fuel, so I know it is getting fuel, but it wouldn't fire. We tried that about 2 or 3 more times, and then finally at the end of that, like 3rd or 4th attempt, it stumbled and stuttered and fired up. That was Saturday night. Drove fine the rest of the night. No codes came up, no check engine light. It never ran rough. It never skipped a beat while we were out there. Sunday, fired right up in the morning, drove it around for about half the day, drove it to the base, loaded it on the trailer to come home. No issues. Got back to Florida, unloaded it from the 2-car trailer, drove it into Matt's garage. Well, I went and got the trailer from my buddy. A couple days later, me and Matt planned to meet up. He drove the GT350 about halfway, and I drove the truck to meet him in the middle to load it up. And that's when all the issues decided to come back. He was driving it on the road, just normal, just regular driving, cruising, and it stalled out on him. And then he went to go fire it up. It was cranking and cranking and not firing, and then it stuttered and fired, and then it was running rough, and it was misfiring. It had check engine light. Cylinder head temperature was not moving. It was stuck on 194. Engine oil and coolant temperature, there were no readings. He limped it to me. We got it loaded on the trailer. The car sounded like absolute crap. So I'm just gonna go through this video from, me investigating the car and finding out what the heck is going on with it. Take along and show you guys as well, because I honestly don't know what's going on with the car. It's not anything that I've ever seen before with this car or any other GT350s in my professional experience or online. So this is definitely a new issue that maybe other GT350 owners have or will encounter in the future, and this might be able to help them out as we troubleshoot what's going on here. So first things first, let's get those codes. We're just going to use the N gauge here to read the codes. So we have P1289 cylinder head temperature sensor circuit high. It says there's 2 DTCs, but that's the only one that's coming up. One of them's gray and one of them's white, so maybe one's active and passive. So cylinder head temperature circuit high. So that fault right there tells me that this may just be an electrical issue. We may have it open in the sensor itself. We may have it open in the harness. That does give me a little bit of hope in this situation. But now we're gonna see if we can duplicate the firing up and rough running issue before we even move this car off the trailer. All right, so she did fire up. It did kind of stumble there. Check engine lights on. We do have oil temperature reading back. Before we did not. Yeah, this gauge is basically, it had a bunch of, the oil temperature, it was just 3 lines. So there was no oil temperature reading. The cylinder head temperature was frozen at 194, and we had no water temp reading. So this definitely is looking like it's pointing towards some electrical issue, or maybe, something in the sensor itself is causing just some wonky readings. So we're gonna go ahead, just investigate what's going on. The cylinder head temperature sensor on these cars is at the back of the passenger side cylinder head. So in order to get to it, we're gonna have to take that intake manifold off. So we got some work to do. All right, we got the car all set up, staged in the garage, ready to get to work on it. Like I said, we're gonna be removing the intake manifold in order to access the back side of the passenger side cylinder head, because that is where the cylinder head temp sensor is. We're not gonna do the step-by-step removal process for the intake manifold. I'll just drop a link below. You can refer to my archetype racing oil balancing lines install video. In that video, we show you how to remove the entire intake system to get to the back of the motor, because that's where we installed the archetype racing oil balancing lines for the back of the cylinder heads. Now, I did that almost 2 years ago. Did I potentially cause an issue and not have a harness, you know, correctly routed? That's always possible. So that's why I definitely need to get this intake manifold off, not only to replace the sensor if it's broken or repair any wiring that might be damaged, but just to see what's going on, because it could be something that I did, or it could just be something that just happens to be back there. You know, like I said, over 2 years ago is when I did that install. Now the timing for this is absolutely horrible, horrible timing. Stuff like this always goes wrong at the worst time. We've got an event in 3 days on Sunday that we were going to be taking the car to, and then spectator drags, the spectator drag championships, $10,000 grand prize is in 2 weeks. So hopefully it is just something simple having to do with that sensor. Either the sensor's broken or some wiring needs repaired. If it's anything internal to that engine, we're not going to spectator drags. And our Sebring track day on December 16th, also probably canceled if there's anything seriously wrong with this engine. So cross our fingers, here we go. All right, so we're in the middle of the teardown of the GT350. Just doing basic checks, checked engine oil level. It's at the lower end of between the 2 dots, so it's still good. I'm not worried about that. The catch can had some oil in it. I haven't honestly checked that probably since like March, so like 8 months ago. It had maybe like a 1/4 inch in there, so again, not much at all. So definitely nothing on that side of things, because we could potentially honestly have 2 issues. You know, we're tracing back to the cylinder head temp sensor, but you know, just making sure that there's nothing else that either is a secondary thing that was caused by that, anything going wrong with it. But we will continue. All right, guys, intake is off. Ports are blocked off. Moment of truth. So your cylinder head temp sensor is right here behind the passenger side head. Got our knock sensors, our direct injection cutouts from when Ford was testing the Voodoo with direct injection. If you didn't know that. So there's very little harness here that's exposed that either is going to make the tracing more difficult or less difficult. I mean, basically we're looking for somewhere where it could have rubbed on some metal, and frankly I'm not seeing anything at this point. Looked all up and down the harness. The cylinder head temp sensor goes into the main harness here. This leg of the harness just deals with the driver's side of the engine. The main harness runs back alongside the passenger side valve cover, down along the front of the cylinder head, and then over to the PCM. So we're looking for any chafed areas or signs of pushing up against metal potentially before we go ahead and pull that sensor off. And I've looked all up and down this. I'm not really seeing anything, so we might just have a bad sensor. I'm going to pull the sensor out to see what it looks like. Maybe try and find the ohm reading. All right, so the brand new sensor actually read higher. It read 28.8 kilo ohms. So in the research that I did find that there's like 2 resistors that are used. I don't know if they're internal to the sensor or not. It didn't really go into depth, but apparently there's one sensor that reads up to a certain point, and then the voltage will change and go back. It'll read from like, we'll just say 0.5 up to like 3.7, and then the second resistor will take over and it'll drop back down to like the bottom end of the range, and build back up. So it's kind of a weird system. So we might be, I need to find out where those resistors are. I don't know if they're in the PCM. I don't know if they're like spliced into the wiring or in the sensor itself. But yeah, I'll be doing more research. I was hoping to definitely have an answer tonight. I'm going to keep looking at some things and go from there. Flash forward, got the new cylinder head temp sensor in there after thoroughly inspecting the wiring harness, pulling the PCM connector, just looking at the pins real quick, make sure, you know, nothing jumped out at me. So we're already there. Replaced this cylinder head temp sensor. Still need to obviously start the car and run it and verify that, but wiring harness looked good to me. PCM looked good to me. Nothing jumped out at me, so the cylinder head temp sensor has been replaced. In my research, I mentioned earlier the 2 resistors in the circuit, and from all the reading I'm doing, it sounds like they're located inside the PCM. So if we still have this issue after replacing the cylinder head temp sensor, then we might actually have an internal issue inside the PCM, because that's where those resistors are located. I'd have to open up the PCM to see if those are even, like, could I replace them? But probably not. I'd probably take it to like some sort of like computer specialist, but we'll go ahead and clear the faults. I'm just gonna run the car as is, because no need putting all that back together. We're just gonna have to come right back out if it is something more serious. So here we go. All right, so good news is the check engine light and the DTC cleared. I was in an active state when we did pull the car in, so that's a good sign for sure. Now let's go ahead and start it. All right, fired up pretty normal for an E85 start. All right, let's go look under the hood. All right, so far so good under here. Make sure everything that we messed with, nice and snug. We're about to go drive it. Sounds good. Definitely not running rough. We'll let it warm up like we normally do, and then go drive it. All right, so far so good on the warm up. Right now we are in the crossover phase where both resistors in the circuit are currently being utilized. 194 was kind of like the magic number that it was kind of stuck on when it wasn't acting erratically. So oil temp's about up to 150, so we're good to go drive it now. I'm also going to go ahead and get some more fuel. We got an event on Sunday at Orlando Speed World that we're trying to make it to, so this is kind of like the shakedown. If the car goes out to Daytona and back flawlessly, we'll be good to go on Sunday. All right guys, we just filled up. Just gonna check to see if any codes popped up like in the background while we were driving out here. Note, the car ran fine. Just gonna see if there's anything pending in that one drive cycle. All right, no DTCs. All right, here we go. All right, she fired it right up as she normally does. So we didn't have the extended crank again. So that's 3 or 4 startups in a row with no extended crank. Temperatures were right where they normally are. It does kind of make you paranoid though. Engine coolant temperature is about 13 to 14 degrees below cylinder head temp. All right guys, we made it home back from Daytona. So we just drove the car for about an hour there and back. Stopped to get fuel, alcohol relearned. Everything seems to be operating normally. Now we just need to get the rest of the car back together, get the trim panel back on, cross brace, windshield wiper, and we should be good to go to Orlando Speed World on Sunday, where we'll really put some strain on that cooling system. So hoping for the best. So it definitely looks like we got the issues with the GT350 sorted out. Definitely hope you found this video helpful. This is an issue that I had not seen ever before on my personal car or any cars that I've ever worked on since these cars have come out, and based on the feedback online that I'm seeing, not many people have seen this issue either. So if you do have this issue where your car has a super extended crank, it just dumps fuel, won't fire, that cylinder head temp sensor circuit high fault, the P1289 fault, and some erratic temperature readings, both the engine oil being lined out, the cylinder head being very variable, sometimes freezing on about 194 is what it seemed to freeze on, and then the water temp gauge being pegged left or right, high or low. You've definitely got a cylinder head temp sensor issue, and probably the cylinder head temp sensor that has gone bad. So looks like we lucked out. Thanks for tuning in. See you on Sunday at the drag strip. See you on the next one here at the Driver Mod.